Well, hello, everybody. I am Jacob Winograd. I am the host of the Biblical Anarchy podcast here at the Libertarian Christian Institute, part of our Christians for Liberty network. And you are watching us right now live in the green room, or maybe you're listening to the audio afterwards that we publish. Either way, glad to have you here with us. I have the guest I have for tonight. I'm very excited to have on. This is his first time being on the show. It's kind of weird because I've watched you a lot and then got to participate in your program very recently. So now we're finally having just a normal dialogue. So it's just cool. Nice to have you on. The guest, for those of you who can't see him because you're listening to the audio later, is Free. He is the host of Are You Smarter Than a Politician? So thanks for joining us tonight, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jacob. Longtime fan of your show, so it's really nice to be on, and I'm, very happy we've gotten to know each other a little bit lately, and it was great having you on the show. You did a great job, and I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I had to go up against a now three-time champ, so I think I had a pretty strong showing for my first time there.
Yeah, you had to go up against Amity, the three-time champ, and Derek Wills, who's strong too. So it was kind of an all-star event. So we kind of threw you in on the deep end.
Yeah, dude, that was awesome though. And I'll tell you what though, I am still mad that Terry did not let us do the thing where we were rewarding each other points. Cause I just thought like, why not? Right. I mean, it would obviously be kind of bad if I was rewarding myself points, but if I want to give my contestants points because man, they're just, killing it with the answers, I feel like I should be allowed to do that. I mean, there were times where I was actually getting frustrated because I felt like they were getting the good questions and then they were just like hitting it out of the park with answers. And then I was always like the third one up. And I was like, man, I got to like rise to the level that they were like raising the bar. And I'm just like, struggling to keep up a little bit.
Yeah, it's the funny thing about the scoring is that like originally that was supposed to be totally fake, and Terry actually like keeps score, and so she's come up with all these rules and stuff, and it's all her.
Dude, it's such a blast. Like on the surface, if you tried to explain it to people, I feel like they would just be like totally don't get it. But like once you've like watched even just one episode, then maybe it's just me because I'm just hyper competitive. I mean, I'm like the type that like when I play video games with my kids, I don't show them mercy. Like I'm like literally like the Kreese from Karate Kid and
Yeah.
Cobra Kai, like no mercy. Like it was even like my middle child, he just turned 6 and we were playing Super Smash Brothers and he started to cry because I wasn't letting him win. And I was just like, listen, I gave myself a 200% handicap on Smash Brothers, but you got to bring it, man. All right. Like I don't raise, marshmallows here. You got to earn your way. I'm super competitive with stuff like that, but it's also in good fun. I did want to, before we get too much into the game show stuff, and things like that, it's your first time on the show and we're doing, I guess the normal part of the libertarian podcast circuit ethos is, the way I like to describe it is that we libertarians, it's like we're attending sometimes an Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's like we're, instead of being recovering alcoholics, we're recovering statists. Most of us. I know like one person who was raised in a libertarian household, so it didn't apply to him when I had him on. But for most of us, we came to libertarianism at some point later in our lives. And so it's kind of like, what's your origin story? At what point did you realize that we were ruled by evil satanic, as I like to call them, evil satanic Epstein Island pedophile ring devil worshippers?
Yeah, I mean, I think we realize it more every day. So, it's like I'd go back like 10 years and think I knew then. And it's like I didn't know anything then compared to what we know today about, how corrupt and evil the whole, government is and, those that control the government. So, but yeah, I've been a libertarian my whole adult life. So I like to say I'm 0 for 9 on presidential elections. So that's quite the record I got going there. And, found Ron Paul like in high school and, got into that even though I couldn't vote then. And, just kind of was self-taught until, I found, resources on the internet and started to learn more about libertarianism and, some of the, Austrian economics and, different thought leaders of the movement. And then, I became pretty anti-war and I got into that end of it even more. And so it's been, pretty much my entire adult life, paying taxes at a large amount, fueled the fire a little bit more. Every government overreach in my life, every time I needed a permit for something or had to pay for something, I became more libertarian. So it's been, a long time, but I'm getting further and further away from believing the government can do anything every day.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, they can do things. It's just nothing good.
Correct.
Right. I mean, when people ask me, be like, Jacob, like, is there anything that you can give the state credit for at all? And I'm like, it's really efficient at killing a lot of people while stealing as much money from us as possible to do it. I mean, I don't know why that would ever be something you'd want to have in society, but like, I guess it's like, that's not something you want to be first at, but I guess, the state gets to claim that for some reason.
I always tell people the day you realize you're a libertarian is when, most people think the government can either fix something or do nothing. And you realize you're a libertarian when you realize the two options are actually they do nothing or they make it worse.
Yeah. No, 100%. I see we have Amity in the chat. Hello, Amity. She said gave me 100 points for giving her and Derek points on Are You Smarter Than a Politician? So I appreciate ever since I've been on the show and I picked up a little bit, I think, of the people from your audience. It's like an inside joke now. Not only, again, kind of an inside joke now. People make the comments. It's just like 100 points. People are like, what's that? It's like, clearly you would never watch Smarter Than a Politician. So people need to do that. Also, click the wrong one because it moved on me. Amity gave you 200 points for being 0-9 on presidential elections. I feel like that's a badge of honor. I had a losing record going until this last time around, and I'm not exactly happy that I changed that because now I'm, I guess, 1-3. So I would have rather been 0-4. But I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm glad Ross is free. That's like the one thing I guess that I can hang my hat on and be like, at least that happened. I think it is such a white pill to see him out and about, and that like it's like I haven't met Lynn, but like we our guys at LCI were at Freedom Fest this past year, which literally like and Lynn's there, and it's like the first time because like Lynn's been going to all these events for, I mean, since her son was put in jail and showing up, and it's like it doesn't take away all the bad things going on in this administration, but man, it is nice just to kind of celebrate that, like a libertarian cause, something that like a mother put time into and that a lot of people put time into, to see that actually come to fruition and to see him a free man. I mean, it does, I think, give us a little bit of hope that when we're all united on something, which can be hard for us libertarians, but when we're all united on something, I think we can make a difference. And that's like one of the few times I remember I'll never forget this. The night that Trump announced the pardon, I had Spike Cohen scheduled for the show, and we literally had something else planned to talk about that night and then changed it last minute just to talk about that. And it was funny. I remember, I think it was, I forget his name. It's the guy who's a musician from, I think his name's Phil, who's on Timcast a lot. And he was like saying, well, you like dissing libertarians and just being like, well, you guys booed Trump when he said he was going to free Ross at your convention. And then we were all like, no, that is the one time, the entire time when he was there, that everyone cheered. No one booed Trump when he said he was going to free Ross. Like, it didn't matter what faction you came from. Didn't matter how much sometimes we libertarians, act like the smallest degree of separation in ideology means that we're mortal enemies. That was the one moment where in a weekend of craziness and mudslinging, everyone comes together and is like, yes, we want that to happen. So,
Yeah,
you know,
I was at the convention. I was front row center for Trump, and I was sitting with Julian Assange's brother, Gabriel Shipton. And so, I mean, that was just a trip talking about Assange with him for the hour that we had to wait before Trump came on. But the interesting thing there was, they played all the clips on mainstream media after the event, and they changed the audio, and the cheers changed depending on which channel it was, and the boos changed depending on which channel it was. And I had video of all of it, and I was putting up video saying, no, we actually cheered for freeing Ross. And it was crazy to be like, have that inside view of how corrupt the media is, and the dealings with the government, and how everybody's always got their thumb on the scale no matter what it is.
yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. And I will say that that is one of the silver linings with Trump, is that, since he came into the limelight in 2015, 2016, is that he's helped to showcase how corrupt the media is. And the yeah, no, so I do want to uh ask you about so we talked about your libertarian origin story. uh Good for you, by the way, for supporting Ron Paul in school, because I certainly did not. I was a raging, because of public school indoctrination. By the time I was done high school, I was a raging uh, leftist. So I thought Ron Paul was a lunatic who wanted to abolish the IRS, which is true. He wanted to abolish the IRS. He just wasn't a lunatic for that. Um, so I've come full circle on that idea. Uh, so we're talking about Trump, and I know that before made the game show that you host now, and kind of on the journey to doing that, you were trying to do a lot of outreach to MAGA to try to kind of push them in a more libertarian direction, which of course is something that I, in my own way, have kind of had uh, experiences and efforts in trying to do that. Like, I attended the Rescue the Republic rally that they held in DC, I guess, yeah, over a year ago now. Man, the last year feels like 2 years, man.
It
It's hard
really
for me to
does.
think. It's hard for me to think like this is only Trump's first year, really.
Yeah.
It feels like 4 years of stuff has happened. But yeah, so that was over a year ago. That was in like the late summer of 2024, and I went there, and and the Libertarian Party was there, and they had a table there, and they were doing outreach, and they were like handing out literature on why tariffs were bad to a bunch of MAGA and Maha supporters. And we still have it if people want to watch it up on our channel on LCI. We were there with cameras, and we were interviewing people, and we have like I think it's like a 30 or 40-minute kind of like mini documentary covering the event. And like, we left the event kind of thinking, maybe there's a possibility to do some inroads with this movement and coalition. And like, even if Trump wins and does a lot of bad things, like, uh maybe the people are more open to working with libertarians than conservatives and Republicans have been in the past. Now, 1 year later, that you know
Right.
that hasn't exactly worked out well. But so that's kind of some of my experience in terms of trying to do outreach to MAGA voters. How did you get started doing that? What were you trying to do, and how did that go for you?
Yeah. So, I made a lot of MAGA friends on Twitter because I was so against, pretty much everything Biden was doing. And, I came back to Twitter, during that era. And so, the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. I ended up, obviously there's way more MAGA supporters than there are libertarians. So I ended up with a lot of MAGA friends. And so when I started doing spaces, Terry Batts and I did, I think, around 125 spaces in the year leading up to the election. And, so I would try to say things like, point out which parts of what people thought were MAGA were actually more libertarianism than they were traditional Republican conservatism. And, so I tried to kind of make, inroads there and teach people about, liberty issues and, the liberty movement, while we had a common enemy. Right. And so, we talked a lot about that. And, I thought the interesting thing about MAGA is that, MAGA is just a catchphrase, right? It's not an issue. And so I feel like the reason that MAGA became so popular is because people saw in MAGA what they wanted to make America great again. So if they were, 1A, 2A, against taxes, whatever it is, against, any form of government overreach or, centralized control, I would point out that that's more libertarianism than it is, traditional Republican politics. And so, we would talk a lot about that. And, we made some headway where people would say to us, that they'd never even heard of libertarianism. Now they think they might be a libertarian. So it was a really interesting time. But then Trump got elected and they all turned on me. And, half the libertarian movement still thinks like I'm MAGA adjacent or, a closet Trump supporter. But if you go look at my feed, you can tell I'm not.
Oh, yeah. That's the frustrating thing. I don't want to dwell on this for too long, but, like, and this goes both ways. Like, there are people I know, like an old acquaintance of mine from the Libertarian Party, our old treasurer, Todd Hagopian, who never met in person, but I generally liked. He did outreach, as did other guys like Spike Cohen and others, did outreach with like the Black Lives Matter protests back in 2020, like during the pandemic and whatnot. Now, say what you want about the Black Lives Matter movement. Like, I didn't support it, and I don't really think they supported it wholesale either. But they were also like, hey, this is a group of people that, like, maybe you don't like the title and the sloganeering, and it's a little bit leaning into identity politics, and that's not exactly what we want to do. But they are kind of responding to some legitimate grievances with our criminal justice system and the police. So, like, shouldn't we be trying to talk to them to sort of affirm what they're getting right, and then maybe offer different solutions and a more philosophically consistent, grounded explanation for why the criminal justice system is bad and why their communities are suffering? And it's not, white people's fault. It's not, Western culture or, I mean, as a Christian, like, it's not, Christianity or anything like that, but it's really the government and the government policies, and not just the current ones, but ones going back, decades, since, like, really, I mean, you could say since the 60s, or really since the New Deal. And I mean, it really, to keep going back, there's so many things that keep stacking on. But the point is, there was a lot of people who would see guys who did that and then just be like, oh, they're a bunch of, like, blue-pilled wokeritarians, and they're just like trying to make libertarianism appealing to leftists, or I don't know, just a bunch of different straw men like that, very similar to if what you went through in the opposite direction, people who were uncharitable. And listen, like, we're all going to have our different, like, not each one of us is going to be equally called or equally gifted to preach, for lack of a better word, the libertarian message to every single group of people that is out there, right? And maybe you might have, like, more than one group, but there's going to be some groups that you're just not going to be that good at giving the message to. Like, I'm pretty good at giving the message to conservatives and a certain niche within leftist circles. If they were like more of the Bernie bro kind of, like, progressive left, which I came from, I can message to those types. But if they're kind of like, think of like a Sam Harris liberal atheist, I have no idea how to message liberty to that kind of person, right? That's just not going to be my forte. But there's probably someone in the movement who could do a really good job at pushing that type of person to consider libertarian ideas. And so, a division of labor is a libertarian principle and a Christian principle. And I just always found it silly that there are people in the libertarian movement who can get so bent out of, and I guess, to be fair, you can go too far in either direction, where you are trying to water down the message, or you are trying to pander or to cater, and that can be worthy of criticism. But then, but I don't know. I think that happens less often than people might think, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you've seen the graphic before where it shows that the Libertarian Party's the best half of both parties, right? And if you think about what people actually care about and the impact they want to see in their life, like it's probably even more than that, because they, even like the people that want tariffs, they want tariffs because they think it'll make America business stronger, make wages go up, things like that, where, we can message to them and say, those are all great things, but tariffs aren't going to do that. And, so
Right.
yeah, I'm with you there. And, I've taken some heat because I've gone to No Kings and, been interested in talking to those people. And,
I mean, that's
obviously I
yeah,
believe in No
good.
Kings.
I mean,
you know,
so like when the No Kings protests were going out, I was doing a lot of memery and graphics and shorts that were playing off of that, because I was like, listen, I understand that the left is maybe a little, you could say they're hypocritical, because they're saying no kings to Donald Trump, who is for sure engaging in a lot of authoritarian uh, foolishness and evil, but it's not like he's the first one to abuse the executive office in these ways. And when the Democrats are in office, like Barack Obama abused the heck out of executive orders and the executive power. And each one does it a little more. Each one expands it a little more for the next one to then abuse that power and then expand it a little more. And so, like, sure, you could criticize that, but also I'm like, hey, at least right now they're kind of at least like calling out the tyranny. And me as a Christian anarchist, like as you can see on my hoodie, although it's kind of faded, our mantra is no king but Christ. So I was like, hey, they're halfway there when they're
right.
doing the No Kings protests. So I'm trying to capitalize on that and get a lot of no king but Christ messaging out there. And sure, maybe like 98% of them will kind of reject it just out of hand, but 2% might be like, "Oh, that's interesting. Maybe I want to learn more about that." So I think I have a background in sales, so I just always think about this like, get your message out message out in front of as many people as possible, because like for every 1,000 people that see the message, you'll probably convert one or two of them, and it's just basic math, and you just rinse and repeat with different strategies for messaging. Different messages are gonna and different products are gonna reach different people, and but I think that makes sense. We're trying to sell liberty to people, so that speaks to that diversity of approach, and also just like uh, just because I think some people sometimes think it's not worth the effort, because they'll just assume, like, I know there's probably a lot of libertarians who just think, why would I go talk to a bunch of MAGA people? They're all, like, I know what they would say. They would say, well, they just worship Trump and they're not going to listen to anything I have to say. And I'm like, maybe you're right about 99% of them, but what about that 1% that actually your message will resonate with?
Yeah, and to use your sales analogy, right? Like the first thing you want to do is listen and hear what they want, what are their goals, why do they think this is the right way, and then meet them where they're at. If you just go out there and you just start preaching and don't listen to them at all, your messaging is going to be ineffective. You're muted, I think.
Yep, I am. Yeah, no, I agree with that. So
Minus 100.
minus 100, yeah. um, so you did a lot of spaces during the lead up to the election. At what
Mhm.
point did doing these spaces, is that what turned it to the game show, or what's the genesis or the origin story of how the game show started? Was that like a sort of gradual thing, it transformed into that, or was it like an idea that just came to you or someone one day and then you hit the ground running with it?
Well, so it's kind of interesting because there's kind of two answers to that question. One was I was burnt out on politics after a summer of the elections, and just obviously there's a lot of negativity both on the libertarian side, but also, just in general, the culture wars and just the red versus blue and all of that. But where the game show really started was during the spaces. I interviewed a bunch of the presidential candidates for the Libertarian Party. Charles Boulay, Lars Mapstead, Chase, Mike Termott. A bunch. Josh Smith. I interviewed a bunch of them, and so leading up to that, I watched a lot of the debates and a lot of the interviews. And what I realized is, if you give somebody the opportunity to give their stump speech, they're probably going to give you their stump speech. And so if you ask these open-ended questions, you're probably going to get the same answer that the last guy got and the guy before them got. So I actually had a debate between Belay, Mapstead, and Chase. And so I came up with this idea of doing a lightning round, which you'll probably, you probably remember from the game show, is now a big part of the game show. So I asked them 72 questions in 11 minutes and only allowed a yes or no answer. And the whole idea behind it was, I wanted to just know, where, when the rubber hits the road, are you a yes or a no on this? Like, I don't want caveats. I don't want exceptions. Like, would you abolish the IRS? Would you abolish the FBI? The big questions like that. And I also wanted to test them in a way that they hadn't been tested before, because when you're looking at a candidate, you don't want to know, can they memorize a 2-minute answer to something? You want to know, when they're under pressure and a decision needs to be made, will they, have the knowledge and the guts to make the right decision? And so I was trying to put pressure on them in a different way, so I could allow people to see them in a different light than they had during the debates or, during interviews. I wanted to give them, to stress test them a little bit in a different way than people had seen. So that's really where it started from. And then I interviewed Ryan Woodcraft, who won in El Paso, and Michael White, and a few people after that. And Woodcraft said to me, well, you've made me do the lightning round twice. You're going to do something else. So that's where I came up with the fill in the blank game, which I call Blank the Government. And, so then, like, I kind of had come up with a couple of these games. So then when the election was over, I called, two of my closest friends and confidants, obviously Terry Batts and Casey Rasmussen, who does the They Both Suck podcast. And I said to them, I'm like, all right, I got this crazy idea. I'm like, what if I did a game show where I took these games that I've been playing on Spaces and, turned them into like kind of a game show format, and we give scores and all of that. And I'm like, tell me it's stupid. And they both were like, actually, I think it's kind of a good idea. Like, I think it'll actually work. And, they'd seen the little stuff I'd been trying on Spaces. And so when they both liked it, I was like, all right, maybe I'm onto something here. So the game show actually started off with kind of, us busting on each other as friends. And it was called You're Not a Real Libertarian. So I would ask a question, and then I would tell the contestant why they weren't a real libertarian and take points away from them. And, so it started off like that. And then we got more and more people that were interested in doing it. And then we expanded it to more than just libertarian. So I changed the name to Are You Smarter Than a Politician? And that's where we're at today.
Wow. So it did kind of develop, you had core components of it that you kind of stumbled upon and just doing the candidate interviews and the Spaces and whatnot, and then had the idea. So that was kind of like what I was assuming probably happened. But it's cool to kind of hear you explain how that organically came about. And I like that idea. I remember I didn't watch that debate between those three. I remember like seeing it promoted. I had already at that point kind of predetermined who I was going to, support. So I wasn't super interested in hearing their answers, but that's an interesting way of grilling candidates. And yeah, when you did that lightning round in the show when I was on, I would have, if I was a candidate, I would have failed that, because I don't know how to give 1-word answers. I mean, that's why I'm a podcaster and not not a kid, because I'm good at taking, something that can be said in 10 seconds and stretching it out to 30 minutes. So that's the name of the game when it comes to podcasting. But yeah, sometimes it is interesting to kind of like try to say something as concise as possible and answer it in a very uh succinct way. But I am not because I know who was there. I wonder what they said on certain things. Did did you ask Chase if he would abolish the would you ask him if they would abolish the FBI?
Pretty much everything.
Okay, yeah.
72 questions. So I hit him with a lot, and yeah, the other part of it was, like some of the debates turn into like I'm more hardcore libertarian than you, and they kind of like one up each other and everything. And I wanted to give people that were listening, maybe for the first time ever, I wanted to give them a lot of knowledge about libertarian ideas. So, just the game of numbers. If I ask 72 questions, they get 72 points of data about what is libertarianism about. And where if I ask half that, they get 50% as much, right? So that's one of the other things I've tried to carry through to the game show is, typically we cover, 60 to 80 questions per episode in around, 90 minutes to 2 hours, depending on, how long the questions go. But, so we're getting a lot of information out there, and, some people are, super 2A. So like if there's a category on 2A, that'll be of interest to them. And then maybe there's other things that they don't think about at all. Like, I'm very much concerned about the surveillance state, and I'm very anti-war. And, so like maybe they don't think about surveillance at all. They think surveillance is a good thing and it's going to keep, kids from getting hurt or whatever they think. And it's like, then I, sprinkle in some surveillance state things, and maybe I pique their curiosity to say, well, maybe Palantir isn't our friend, and maybe the government having all of our data is a bad thing, and maybe the backdoor into our devices is a bad thing. Maybe they'll start to think about it and look at it from a different point of view.
Oh, for sure. And like a lot of these things, like they intersect, and you can often find ways to push people to care about even the issues they don't care about by showing it how they connect to the issues they do care about. Like I remember talking to someone at my church who, like for me, I think you mentioned it too, like one of my top things is being anti-war and foreign policy and just being a, foreign policy junkie. I mean, there's like, every Scott Horton book that's ever been published is behind me somewhere on this wall. And I've
Right.
always been reading on what's going on in the Middle East. And like I was raised in a conservative evangelical household, but then I found out very early on in high school, learning the history about like the real reasons for why we were attacked on September 11th, and it just kind of shattered my paradigm. And ever since then, I've been just trying to stay ahead of the propaganda. But there's a friend of mine at church who is a, kind of conservative, not libertarian, but certainly at least like economically leaning in that direction, but more of a in favor of government interventions in like culture war, social issues. But he doesn't care at all about foreign policy. He's like, Jacob, like I just like, he's like, when you talk about foreign policy, I just like my brain just switches off, because I'm just like, I don't like, yeah, maybe it's wrong. Maybe he's like, listen, I don't, he probably has like a Matt Walsh like take where he's like, we probably shouldn't do all the foreign aid we do, so as a fiscal conservative, I'm against that, but I don't really care what's going on around the world. And I'm like, okay, but that part of what is driving, like you care about the economy and you care about the debt. What's driving up the debt? What's driving up the money printing? It's the foreign affairs. And you might say, I wish we were out of them. It's like, but how can you effectively advocate to pull us out unless you know the arguments and the propaganda going on that are the reasons for why people purport why we need to be over there fighting all these wars? Same with the surveillance state and all that. If you're talking to a left winger or a right winger that care about those issues, and you'll be like, whether you're concerned about the government spying on you or you're concerned about law enforcement, it's like, what is trickling down to both of those is our military, because what happens in our military trickles down to both of those things. So I mean, that was like the whole big thing with the Patriot Act, right? It's the protect us from terrorists here at home. So yeah, so it's like that. I found that it's useful to, instead of like trying to convince someone just on like my own sort of presuppositions and beliefs to care about an issue. Yeah, you attack it from multiple angles to be like, well, you care about this, and this is, how this is only 1 degree of separation removed from these other things.
Yeah, and you mentioned Scott Horton, and I'm a big fan of his, and antiwar.com and Dave DeCamp, and so they do such important work, and obviously they've been prolific and just produced volumes of information, and produce hours and hours of content every week, and so like that's, to me, that's not an area that needs to be filled. They're filling it very nicely. So I see my role as hopefully handing people off that are new to the movement or curious to the people like that, and you're another example. Like your organization and what you do is specific and speaks to a certain audience. I want people to meet you and say, hey, I'm going to go check out Jacob's show. I'm going to listen to some of the archives and learn more about it, and find issues that are important to me in there, and binge listen to some of it. And so like I see myself as like the guy at the door where I greet people, and then I introduce them to my friends. And I think I was joking with you when you were on that, I kind of see the show as almost like libertarian speed dating, where the audience gets to meet like 3 of my friends and decide, do they like all 3? Do they like one of the 3? And they can then go and follow you on social media, listen to your show, become fans of yours and learn from you like I have.
Yeah. And I think the nice thing about your show is that we need more people in the movement doing what you do. Like, we have the activist class in the libertarian movement, right? People who are out there doing the thankless work sometimes. And I did this for a while and I hated it. I'm not built for it, but I see the need for it. Doing the door knocking, doing the petition filling, doing the that's just for getting candidates elected and getting ballot access. But then there's people who are out there doing grassroots work for causes like Defend the Guard, or for Second Amendment stuff, like if you're part of the GOA. Like, there's so many good issue-based organizations in the liberty movement. You Are the Power. You Are the Power, another great organization. There's tons of people out there doing this work, and they're like the activist class, and they often, like, they don't have the sexiest work in terms of the movement, but they are often the ones behind the scenes doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And then you have, I guess, the educator and podcast class, and I guess I consider myself kind of part of that with what I do with the Libertarian Christian Institute. But then we don't have enough of this. Is like, we need a class of like people who are entertainers and like culture warriors. But what I mean by culture warriors is not in the traditional sense of like, I need to fight on behalf of my left-wing or right-wing social issues for government power. But I mean, like, engaging in the culture in different ways, in different niches in the culture, to inject libertarian ideas through entertainment, through music, through art, through writing. And like, there are some people out there who've done this, who have written fiction novels. Like, I know Derek for ANCAP Air has written both nonfiction and fiction work. I know guys who have created comic books, who have written songs and music, and so it's not that we don't have it, but I feel like it's like, if there's one part of the libertarian movement that's not saturated, it's that, right? Like, it's always the joke in the libertarian podcast sphere. It's just like, it's we just need, like, I saw someone in the chat said ZZ Liquid Zulu is the way forward. And I'm friends with Zulu and his crowd, and he literally just started a new podcast with one of our mutual buddies who goes by Monhop on X, and literally titled the first episode like, just what the world was waiting for: one more libertarian podcast, right?
Right.
So it's like, because that's what everyone does. And it's good. Like, I think podcasts are good, even though it is kind of a joke to talk about how many of them we have, but it is a rather saturated market unless you find a particular niche or way to go at it. But what we don't have enough of are people out there who, kind of like the way I'll connect this to like a Christian thing. There are obviously there's like Christian rock, like Christian rock music. But then there are just people who are out there who are like, they're just Christians who do music, and they kind of let their values speak through just the art in a not in your face way, but it just comes out in what they're doing. And we need that, but I think that, the libertarian version, we need more of that, because I think that is a not tapped enough way to kind of, push people in the direction of thinking about uh, government overreach, or, just even like the values of liberty, just like individual rights, um, pushing back again. Because obviously, a lot of the stuff that's in the culture right now, movies and music, entertainment, comes from a worldview of people who aren't libertarian. So their values are what are baked into that. And it can sometimes be, like, it's not always like in ways that are super nefarious, but it still kind of bugs me where like you'll see even like in the in sort of even like superhero movies and kids movies and stuff, all this like kind of hidden, kind of subtly nefarious, like collectivist rhetoric, right? Like, we all belong to each other and stuff like that. And like, and even like uh in kids shows, and just like the implicit like teaching kids that, like, oh, that's a police officer, always trust and listen to the police and stuff like that. Now I homeschool my kids, so like, I counteract that propaganda, but you get what I'm saying. Like,
Sure.
there's overt and covert ways to push our values through culture, and I think what you're doing is it's kind of overt, but at the same time it's entertainment, and so it's kind of a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's trying to find that balance too, right? So, I try to stay neutral on things, and I try to let the contestants speak, and I try not to like bring the hammer down on them too often. And because even when I have MAGA contestants that are like hardcore, like very conservative, like almost on the neocon side of MAGA, like I still control the format, right? So I'm asking the questions, and I'm asking the questions from my point of view and the pro liberty point of view. So I'm still controlling the narrative to a point. And so I try to do it that way, in a subtle way, instead of just telling them why they're wrong and shaking my finger at them and chastising them. And so, sometimes I get crap about that because I don't go hard enough on somebody, and I don't push back hard enough on certain topics. But, I like to try to like make them feel welcome, and let them share their opinions, and then let people decide for themselves. And like you said, even if we only win a little bit, like if we can get them to think about, if they can watch my show and think about one thing differently, or get curious and do more research on one thing, that's a win to me. So if they bring their audience, which aligns with them, maybe we can reach a bunch of people and change their hearts and minds about certain issues.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's something I've noticed lately. I'm curious to get your take on this, because there's been all sorts of drama. This is part of the ongoing, I guess, what people call the civil war in MAGA and on the right. People who are, even if they're not calling for outright cancellation, they're kind of calling for like a, uh, I mean, not like cancellation like censorship, but cancellation in terms of like, these people aren't real MAGA and they're not, honest actors or whatnot. People going after Tucker Carlson, people going after even guys like Piers Morgan, people going after even some of our guys like Dave Smith, because of who they've platformed. Like, a couple of those guys have platformed Nick Fuentes. Piers Morgan hasn't, but he's platformed a couple other people like, uh, what's that one guy's name? Crap. If he comes back to, Myron Gaines, I think is his name. People who like are not libertarian, who have views that I think are, you know, not good, to say the least, often even a mixture of like reprehensible views. And so, yet when Tucker had Nick Fuentes on and when Dave had Nick Fuentes on, obviously they could have spent the entire time being like, okay, on this day, you said this on Twitter. And on this day, here's this clip of you saying this awful thing on your show. And just like, first of all, there's no guarantee Nick would have even stayed for all of that. And second of all, if you just bring someone on and be like, I think you're an awful person and everything you believe is horrible, and I'm going to sit here and berate you for the next 2 hours, is that going to win that person over? Is that going to win that person's audience over? Now, anyone can do Monday morning quarterback and be like, yeah, but you could have challenged him more here, or you could have asked him this question. Okay, fair enough. Maybe you think you could do it better. Why don't you have these people on and you show us how it's done and how to challenge these people and how to change their minds? But I think part of what you're getting at, which maybe there's a line in the sand where someone's so extreme that this doesn't apply. But I think there's a general principle, whether you're talking to a neocon who is advocating for something I consider genocide going on in Gaza, or you're talking to someone who's more of a liberal and thinks we need to arm Ukraine to the teeth so that they can fight Russia to the death or something, risk nuclear war, or on whatever anti-libertarian issue we want to talk about where people can be bad on a litany of things. Like, are we going to die on every hill in conversation number one? Or are we going to try to be gracious and realize that the way to win people over is to build relationships with them and prioritize the issues we want to talk about and plant seeds and ask questions, listen to their point of view, and think about things not in just like in terms of one conversation, but a series of conversations over time. And that's often way more productive and gives you more opportunity to push back on their bad ideas when you approach it that way. So I guess that's the way I see it, but I'm curious for what your thoughts are.
Yeah. You're saying, exactly the thing that I think, which is, some of us need to be accessible, right? There's room for the hard hitting stuff and the debates and all of that. But, some of us need to be accessible, right? And we need to be welcoming, and we need to, let people have their opinions and let them speak, and then also invite in their audiences. If they're, prominent people that have audiences, bring those people in as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think the same kind of thing. Like, I think out of 100 contestants, I've only had one rage quit on me. So, and a MAGA fellow at that. But so, like, I think if you, have that whole, gotcha mentality where I'm going to trip you up and I'm going to, bring the receipts and trick you into saying something that's controversial that I can bust you on, I think that would have a very limited lifespan, and that I'd end up just talking to people that agree with me at that point. And that's not my goal.
Right. And I think that there's like, this is something I struggle with on my show and my platform. And it's like, so it's funny. Kay said he's going to rage quit on the next one.
That's my buddy Casey. He's been on more times than anybody else, and he hasn't rage quit yet. So,
so like, I think that first of all, some of this is kind of like, we have to keep in mind that like there are things that we're conditioned to view as reprehensible, but that doesn't mean that, like, maybe it is, but like there's other things that maybe are equally reprehensible. Like, I love having people on my show who I disagree with, because as much as like these conversations are good, and like this is more of like I'm getting to know you and get your backstory and things like that, and I think that's really edifying for like both of our listeners. And yet, if a show is just always kind of like one dimensional, where it's just like, and this week I had on this guy and we agreed on everything, and this week I had this guy on and we just agreed on everything, and this week you know what I mean? Like, contrast is kind of part of life. It's an important part of life. And finding, and I'm sure even like at some point we'll probably find something in this conversation where maybe we even agree on something, but we have slightly different takes on it. And even that slightly different angle, that contrast is engaging and interesting. But then, especially, I think, as much as I'm, very much a partisan libertarian and Christian, I I don't think echo chambers are actually a libertarian virtue. I think, uh, non-ironically, diversity is kind of our strength. Now, the left says that, and they only mean skin color, but I think diversity of worldview and of thought and of background and economic uh, background, even, and expertises, like, that's the free market at play and the free market of ideas at play. So I like having people on, even people who I might think have a couple reprehensible views, like, and I'm not going to equate them, uh, but like, I've never had Nick Fuentes on, but obviously Nick has said some really horrible things. But he said some good things, like after the Charlie Kirk shooting, he said we need to de-escalate and not respond to the left with violence and disavow violence. And even though I have some, even he was like, listen, I have racist views, but I don't think we should advocate for no, and it's contradictory to things he said in the past. But then he's also against, like, even if it's not for entirely the right reasons, he's against war and he's against what's going on in the Middle East. Now, contrast that with someone like James Lindsay, and I've had James Lindsay on my show. And I think James Lindsay, ideologically, he's not a Christian, but he's done a lot of coverage on things like Christian nationalism and wokeism on the left that I find valuable. Now, on the other hand, James Lindsay has spent the last 2 years defending what's going on between Israel and Gaza. And then I could say, and actually a lot of my audience, when I had him on, said, Jacob, how can you talk to this guy? He hates libertarians and he advocates for and I'm like, yeah, I know, but I still want to talk to him because, I mean, I hope I can try to change his mind. And just because he's fundamentally wrong on some things doesn't mean he's wrong on everything. And the conversation is hopefully good for his audience and mine. And I think that's how we win, is not by shutting down these conversations, but having more of them.
Absolutely. And so what I try to do with my show is I try to do like a category, and then I ask all 3 contestants a question from that category. And then I try to write the question so it speaks to either, their passion about the issue or something that would be specific to, their makeup or their background. And, so like when you were on, I was trying to get like the Christian libertarian perspective on a certain issue, right? And so to go back to a previous point you made, sometimes even when we're in the echo chamber and it's 3 people that pretty much agree with everybody and I agree with them, even just teaching people different ways to message an issue or a solution is valuable, right? So like when I had Larry Sharp's been on a few times, he's great with solutions, right?
Love Larry.
I would feed him questions where I knew he would talk about, one of his solutions, like, selling the naming rights to all the bridges in New York. And so I would try to tee him up for that because that's something that he's the best at in our world. And so, like, even when we agree on everything, there's different ways of saying it. There's different ways of reaching people with it. So I'm really going after that.
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, we need like 100 more Larry Sharps. I mean, like, I'm a huge Dave Smith fan and Spike Cohen fan, and they're great at like preaching the message. And Spike's good with his "You Are the Power" and the work there. But like, man, if we had like 100 more Larry Sharps with like their ability to like creatively think of policy proposals that push things in a libertarian direction without like being on the face, like just so like contrast that when you had me and Derek and Amity on, and at some point it was just a meme where we were just like, I don't know how to answer this, just abolish it next, right? You know what I mean? But
Right.
Larry is able to be like, okay, well, he's kind of like he's the good cop, right? To use an anti-libertarian analogy, but like guys like Derek and me, we're like the bad cops. We're just like, privatize everything now. And then Larry comes in like, okay, so like there are these crazy radical anarchists, right? But like, how about this policy proposal, which is actually still moving it in our direction, but it's
Right.
like that intermediary step. So like we need 100 more Larry Sharps, because like, I mean, he's just one guy and he decides to put all of his energy into like the second most, you know, doomed state in the union. But I keep telling him he's got to get out of there, because I think New York's the California of the East. But yeah, I can't blame him for trying to save his hometown. But yeah, so I think, yeah, like there is something about uh the, like, we need both, right? Like there's that expression like preaching to the choir. And like you got to preach to the choir. You got to have those moments where like you're shoring up the base. Something I wanted to talk to you about is that I'm sure you've seen it too. Like the infighting's always there, right? And if I'm black pilled about anything, it's just like, it's the infighting. But I've seen some people in the movement who are more black pilled because, like, whether it's this current administration or maybe sometimes, and not to be ageist, but maybe sometimes it's like people I know who have been libertarians for like 30 or 40 years and they're just like, I don't know,
Easy,
like
easy, easy.
uh no, but like I have good friends even here at LCI. Like I have, co-associates of mine who are just like, I've been in this a long time and like I just, I'm gonna keep on preaching the message, but the world just hates freedom and nothing's ever gonna get better. And there's no point in even showing up to vote for libertarians and trying to argue with people, and they just kind of start to check out a little bit. And even like, I don't mean to pick on him, but like I've seen even Derek at times, and I've tried to encourage him. Same with our mutual friend uh, Brent of the Aiming Up podcast.
Yeah,
Great,
Brent
great,
Freeman.
yeah, Brent Freeman, great fellow, libertarian anarchists who have their own shows, or do their own different things. And I've seen them at points kind of like have this like, just like, man, I'm just like, this is just too hard. Like nothing's ever going to get better. And they're just like, black pilling for times. And I'm trying to cheer them up. But like, so what are your thoughts on that? Like, because I think on one hand, I get what they're saying, that like, man, we keep on doing all this work and the state just keeps getting bigger, keeps spending more, keeps bombing more people, keeps, finding new ways to encroach on our liberties. Uh, but yeah, I kind of feel like at the same time, and some of this is like disenfranchised MAGA voters give me a little bit of hope because I see some of them moving our direction. But like, I think for all the turmoil and all the ups and downs, I still think the liberty movement is growing and is poised to grow. But maybe that's just me being hopelessly optimistic. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's, the funny thing about Trump getting elected, right, was, I think if Kamala would have gotten elected, we would have gotten all of those people, that they would have all given up on the corrupt system and they would have all come back, But I do think it's, a positive that, all the libertarians that promoted Trump and endorsed Trump seem to be coming back to us. So I think that that's a good thing and, a positive sign. And, so yeah, I mean, I definitely go through black pilled moments, and there's certain shows where you can see I'm not feeling it, and we're gonna bomb Iran, and it's just absolutely terrible stuff all day, every day, and it wears on me. But I think that you do see signs of people pushing back against this, and people realizing that they've been lied to yet again and fell for it again. And I think that it'll be an interesting, few years here with the midterms coming up, and then, Trump being done hopefully in, 3 years. So, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens, because, one of the things I'm really concerned about is the technocrats, and JD Vance is obviously,
Yeah.
a Peter Thiel puppet at this point. And, so if he's the chosen one to carry on MAGA, I mean, that's a really scary thing. And so, people like Aaron Day are out there doing a great job talking about that all the time and getting that in front of people. And, so I think, people start to realize, I feel like anytime people encounter the government, they're probably going to come to our side a little bit more. And the government's encroaching so much on every one of our freedoms and every aspect of our lives that, like, people are just one court case away from becoming a libertarian, or one audit away from becoming a libertarian, or one failed small business away from becoming a libertarian. So if the government continues to go in this direction, I think people will be flying over to our side saying, like, I cannot believe I voted for this nonsense, and just ready to fight back.
Yeah, no, I think that there's something you said, like it makes me think that like part of the issue here with why, like, I think some of us, I think this was partly me, and I think there's partly other people. I think a lot of libertarians were, because you mentioned like the people like saying like they fell for it, and like I've tried to be gracious about that over the last few months. Like when I kind of announced that I regretted voting for Trump, and people were they were for a while posting that meme of like the blue ribbon fell for it award thing in my
Right.
comments, and I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna take that on the chin and take the lumps. But like I and like I to be fair, like I understand people can say that the warning signs were there, and I guess they were. Like you mentioned, like the technocrat stuff, and like certainly, like I'm simultaneously excited and terrified about AI, because like all new technology makes me this way. Like even like the digital age we live in is simultaneously so good for freedom and yet so easily weaponized by the state against us. And the AI is the same way. AI is so like exciting when you think about the possibilities of sort of multiplying and enhancing human innovation and productivity, and then also terrifying when you think about just learn about the ways in which the military and law enforcement are already finding ways to weaponize AI to further encroach on our freedoms with these programs designed to basically like predict crime using algorithms, and track down potential terrorists and bomb them using AI. So like it's like simultaneously like nightmarish and dystopian, while also exciting at the same time. So, but there were things about like what Trump was doing that I guess in hindsight you could say was all performative. But I think for a lot of us, because it's so hard to get wins, like I was talking about earlier with like Ross and all that, it's so hard for the libertarian movement to get wins, that then when Trump came in and he like, you gotta say he it was at least, the Tom Woods expression, no matter who you vote for, you end up with John McCain, right? And all politicians lie and make promises. This was at least the only time I can think of where there was this concerted effort to really go to libertarians and make a direct pitch to them with specific promises to them. And I'm not even just talking about the convention. I mean, even like the month leading up to the election, Trump and his son and Elon Musk and all them, and talking about Doge, and they're like saying we're going to bring Ron Paul in to advise on Doge and all this, and it's just like, you're like, all right, maybe there's a chance here that like it's going to be different this time, right? And I think there's something to the black pill, like it's almost like these are like two equal opposites you have to avoid, of like you don't want to like black pill, but then like in your desperation to not be black pilled, you also have to be wary of like false hope or false promises. So I don't know how to navigate that, because it's like what I'm really concerned about, which I don't know if you share this concern, is like I don't want to be so like skeptical of progress being made that like we never take any risks or chances, or like I get disgruntled with some of the anarchists types, even though I am an anarchist, who basically they feel like their strategy is just like they don't have a strategy. They're just like they're so concerned about violating the principles that then we don't ever take any action because we risk compromising in some way. And I don't know if I have an answer to that other than just I feel like I don't want to have paralysis of action, but I also don't want to compromise so much that we make deals with the devil that we end up regretting. So I don't know the way out of that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I get frustrated with the same, rhetoric from people, like not voting, or the stuff about shunning the minarchists recently. And it's like, like 150 million people voted in the presidential election. Like, we're not going to convince everybody to stop voting overnight. And so we have to deal with the world that we're living in. I believe in incrementalism, where if we got 5 more Thomas Masseys, that would cause gridlock in Congress. And, there would be significant changes because of that gridlock. So, that to me is something worth working for, even though I am an anarchist, right? And, locally, there can be significant wins locally, with just a few thousand votes, right? So I don't see
Even
why you would stop fighting locally.
even a couple dozen votes, man. Like, and
Right.
I haven't talked about this on my show yet, because it's a little bit bittersweet. But so when I was with the Mises Caucus, I took over with Mises Caucus guys, took over like the local county party, caused all sorts of drama and division, plus because of the national takeover and state takeover, and we lost some people in the county party. But one of the people who I've since kind of tried to mend the bridge with, she is still a small L libertarian, and she ran for mayor of my borough. We live in the same borough here in Pennsylvania, and she won she won, like she won as an independent running for mayor, and she won by 16 votes.
Right.
And like I initially offered to help her because it was more of like a personal thing. I was kind of like, hey, we had some beef between us in the past because of dumb LP drama that I feel kind of responsible for. And I just want to, like, as a gesture of goodwill, like, you're running for mayor, and like, despite whatever disagreements we have, I'm like, you're a libertarian. So like, of course I'd rather you be mayor than the Republican who's running with no one to contest him other than you. But I was like offering to volunteer and just kind of still expecting the same result that I'm used to in my life, which is, even like libertarians will be like, we got 3% of the vote in any election and be like, that's a win. And it's like, I guess it's good for ballot access, but it, it doesn't really win anything. But then she won by 16 votes. And it was just like, that's just for me, for my kids. It was like even like such an encouraging moment for them to just show them like, hey, you get involved locally in something you believe in, like, these kind of things are possible, so like I have it's not a big L, but I have a small L libertarian mayor. I'm like, now what if we replicated that and had like across the country 1,000 libertarian mayors elected, right? Like you're telling, and then, add constables to that, add city councilors to that. Like, so I mean, maybe there's not any hope in DC, although I'd love to get 5 more Thomas Masseys, but the local level, like, there's still a lot we can do. And I think that absolutely makes a difference, even if it's just convincing people to, like, I think some people think that you can't bust out of the 2-party system, right? That like, just no matter what, you got to vote red or blue. I had this conversation with my sister yesterday, and she's like more of a Democrat, but she understands how bad the Democrats are. But she's just like, I don't know, Jacob, you got to vote for the lesser of 2 evils because voting for your principles never works. Like, maybe it never works because we've been convinced by the system, by the uniparty, that it can't work. Maybe if enough of us believed it could work, it would work. Right.
Well, 2/3 of the libertarians that ran in the most recent election won. And, I think Stephen Nikela and Paul Dar and, everybody working for that did a phenomenal job. So, I mean, I can't remember a result like that. So, I mean, maybe it is heading in the right direction, but, I think that, whether you're fighting for, one thing that's on the ballot or you're fighting for something in your own town, I think it's important to, stick with your convictions and try to fight wherever the fight is.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, first of all, I want to take a minute here. We'll go for about 20 more minutes. I did want to just plug for everyone who's listening that this is December. It's December 1st, and we here at LCI, we're a nonprofit. And so we rely on donations. And like every year, we usually have matching campaigns. This year, we have an awesome matching campaign. If you guys go to libertarianchristians.com/donate, which I have there at the bottom ticker, every dollar, and there's no cap on this. We have very generous matching donors this year. Every dollar you donate in the month of December is going to be matched. So last year we had a $5,000 matching campaign, and we used that to really expand our efforts here at LCI and to publish several books, to travel to different events across the country like Freedom Fest. And we're really hoping to ride this momentum because we think that, obviously that like we can preach this message of the connection between our being Christians who believe in the gospel, who believe in the kingship of Jesus Christ, and why the consistent application of following Jesus' teachings is the non-aggression principle. That's the best way to love your neighbor when it comes to, like, if you're going to talk about loving your neighbor in a political sense, in an economic sense. So we want to get that message in front of as many people as possible. So if you're listening tonight and, obviously liking this and sharing it with your friends on social media makes a big difference. But if you're able to, even if you just want to, donate $5 and help us, get this fundraising this month for the end of the year started, we greatly appreciate that. Free, I did want to ask you, we've been political here for a little bit, but since I just pitched LCI and the gospel stuff, I know you're, I know you're a couple with Amity. I know Amity is a Catholic. I'm curious, I haven't heard you talk about it. What is your, faith background? Do you have any, religious background? Do you have any particular beliefs? Are you still searching or agnostic on that? I'd be curious to, I'm not going to be preachy at you if you aren't, but I am curious to, just kind of hear where you're at with all that.
No, I'm a Catholic as well.
Okay. Cool. So, cradle Catholic?
Cradle Catholic. Yep. Went to Catholic school. One of the reasons I realized I was anti-authority was I went to Catholic school and had nuns for teachers. So I realized at a very early age that I didn't like to be told what to do, and I was against authority of all forms. So
that is funny.
I've actually worked within the Catholic Church. I worked at the largest Catholic graduate school in the country, the school that actually Pope Leo went to. And,
oh, wow.
Cool. So I was the head of IT there. And so I've had some different experiences in the church. I've worked with youth programs and, so I'm not like, a good Catholic, but I definitely have Catholic belief and Catholic faith.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but like I've noticed that a lot of the comments I get in terms of like people saying Christians can't be libertarians, and listen, there's there's Amity, there's Tom Woods, there are tons of Catholic libertarians and anarchists. So like, I'm not saying they don't exist, but I guess I've noticed that if there was one denomination or part of Christianity that maybe tends to the most say that like, oh, you can't be a Catholic and a libertarian, it has, at least in my experience, come from the Catholic Church. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Seamus Coughlin. He's the creator of Freedom Tunes. He used to be, and I used to talk to him back in the day because I was like a Patreon supporter of his when he was starting out. He used to be a Catholic ANCAP, But then the more he became Catholic, he said, then the less he felt like he could be a libertarian and an ANCAP. And for him, it was like, well, I can't. Either I can't be a libertarian because I'd have to support abortion, or I can't be a libertarian because the cat. So I don't know. Like I'm not an expert on Catholicism, but I try to be as well informed as I can be as a Protestant. I don't think there's anything in the Catholic Church that says like, thou shalt obey the state or anything like that. Like, so it never appears to me like there's a major conflict, but I don't know if you've noticed anything or what your experience there is. I mean, you said, the Catholic, the nuns made you a libertarian, which is funny.
Yeah. I'm from Chicago originally, and they have no problems, telling you to vote Democrat. So, I don't think there's anything in the teaching. And, I think that a lot of, Catholic values and Christian values are, very similar to, liberty values, and, that, we're supposed to respect each other and, be good to each other. And I think those are just very, core things, whether you're hoping to live a faith-based life or you're just hoping to be, a good person.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not a theological argument, but something I often like to pose to people is just to be like, read the Gospels and read the life of Jesus and apostles, and then just like any law that you want to pass, insert the libertarian analysis that every law is enforced by the point of the gun, and then be like, okay, would you want to be the person enforcing this law and do it knowing that Jesus is watching you do it and you're claiming to have faith in him? Like, right? Like, take an issue like immigration. And I understand the kind of like bordertarian perspective. Like, I know Amity's not for open borders. I'm not exactly like an open borders libertarian. I actually think Amity and I, even though she's more of a minarchist, I think we agree on this, where I'm like, I understand that while you have a state that like there's consequences to totally open borders, but obviously, like, I know Amity doesn't support mass deportations and doesn't support the way the current administration's doing it. And so when I'm talking about this issues to like my Christian friends, I'm like, okay, say what you want about like we can't invite the whole world here, and welfare and cultural values clashing, but like, okay, you're saying we need mass deportations. So are you going to like, would you join ICE if you were qualified to? And would you hold a gun? And would you kick down the door of somebody's house because they're here illegally? And you'd say it's a father or a mother or family, and you're going to point that gun at them and say, you're not allowed to be here. And you're going to threaten to shoot them if they don't comply with your orders, to then ship them back off to either their country or into some detainment camp with no due process. And are you going to do that? And then do you want to, on the day of judgment, stand before Jesus and answer for that action and be like, yeah, I think Jesus would be proud of me at that moment. I think it's the thing Jesus wanted me to do, right? Like, again, that's not like a super deep, like, like in our, that's not an argument you'll see in any of our books that we've written about, like, more complex theological arguments for why the Bible teaches libertarianism or teaches a political theory that's compatible with libertarianism. But I think that's kind of a compelling personal argument to kind of like put it, like, you're going to follow Jesus and you're going to use violence against your neighbor. I don't know. That doesn't quite square in my understanding of Christianity.
Yeah. And the bad guys in the Bible a lot of times were the government too, right? So, we have been taught, through the Bible and through mass that, those are the bad guys a lot of the times. And then, we walk out the doors and all of a sudden we're like, yeah, no, we want more policing and, more government regulations and government overreach and government control, right? So, yeah, it kind of blows my mind that people, have such a strong faith, but at the same time trust the government so much.
Yeah, I think that the for me, like, I think, because I'm not a Catholic, I'm a low church Protestant, but like if I was a Catholic, I would kind of be like, you know, your high church, you think church authority is super important, and that should make you be like, uh when the state's encroaching on church authority, like that should make you angry. I can't remember if I made this point on your show or another time. I remember Amity was agreeing with me in the comments when I said this last. But like, especially if I was a Catholic and I believed in uh like the Catholic view of the Mass, of the Eucharist, and I was a Catholic during COVID when they're telling churches that they can't meet, not even outside, and Catholic churches were like told like they can't deliver the Eucharist or the elements to people. And then Catholic churches were just going along with that. I was like, okay, well, based on my understanding of Catholic theology, like there's not like, I think there are many reasons why Christians should disobey government when it oversteps its bounds. And I can't think of a reason, like there's only a few things that would rank higher than denying people the Mass, the Eucharist, in
Well, it
terms of
wasn't just
reasons to
Catholic
not.
churches. They shut down all the churches in
Well,
Florida.
right.
They arrested a pastor down here from a Christian church. I know a lot of Catholic churches moved services outdoors in an effort to get around that. So I think it was, the government's attack on religion, which, I always tell people, like, if you're religious, the next thing they'll come for is your church and your religion.
I mean, that's what the Bolsheviks did. It's what the
Yeah,
communists did.
exactly.
Which I've Eastern Orthodox can sometimes still kind of go down this like Christian nationalist route, but I've noticed there's a lot of Eastern Orthodox who are very open to libertarianism because they're just like, yeah, we know how dangerous it is to give the state any power because we they've lived through some tremendous persecution out there, in the East. So yeah, no, I think that, so as we're drawing to a close here, I guess what is one thing that you think we as like the libertarian movement aren't talking about enough? We all have our pet issues, right? Like I think when I was on Larry's show and I was on your show, I mean, if it would have been a drinking game to take a shot every time someone said end the Fed, people would have passed out. How many times we said it, right? So we got it. Libertarians are good on ending the Fed. We talk about it all the time, as we should. But like, what are some issues you think that the liberty movement, the libertarians aren't talking about enough?
I guess I would say, local economics, right? About how they're trying to kill small businesses. They make it nearly impossible to start a business. Startup costs for a business are absolutely through the roof. Compliance costs are like half of a business costs. I think 50% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. Every single thing that they're doing favors their cronies and large businesses and hurts small businesses. Tariffs is a perfect example. I think we're not talking enough about how that's killing small businesses. That God forbid you manufacture something here that requires a chip, and now we're putting tariffs on the chips, and the cost of manufacturing the vacuum cleaner that you make that requires a chip doubles. So I think that we need to talk about monthly bills, like that libertarianism would bring down your monthly bills immediately. It would make it easier to start a business. I was talking to one of my friends who's Black, and I was saying, Maj talks a lot about how, that Black Americans are an untapped market for libertarianism. Like,
Yeah.
No one has held that community back more from being successful than the government has. Like all of the occupational licenses to do hair and child care and all of these things. Like, people should be allowed to start a business with just their reputation and their skills, right? So I think we need to bring it down. Like when Joe Hanush ran for a state seat here in Florida, him and I went through and we figured out, like, we could take a knife to the budget and, change regulations here. And we could save people hundreds of dollars a month on their insurance, their monthly bills, their energy costs, the grocery costs. Like, all of these costs would come down immediately if we'd get rid of the government overreach with regulations and, fixing the system to pick the winners out of their group of friends.
Yeah. No, that's so true, man. And yeah, if you did an interview show, I would tell you to have me back on. Someone should have me on to talk about this because, like, I've shared bits of this before, but like, I am one of the people who lived through losing a small family business because of well, COVID was the final nail in the coffin, but we had been dying a slow death because of everything, 90% of what you just laid out in terms of just all of the costs that burden small businesses and entrepreneurs, but that big mega rich corporations often are able to find ways to get exemptions from or move around, or they'll write the regulations in ways that they hit them less hard than other people. And we've rightly focused a lot on, the federal and state regulations, but sometimes the local stuff and the local taxes and the property taxes, like, they can be absolutely killer, and just put people on the, like there are so many small businesses that can't afford to compete with the large ones because they can't hire enough help, because, like, just hiring people costs way too much money and brings upon businesses way too much risk. And so you end up with a lot of entrepreneurs and small businesses where the guys are like working 80 hours a week, because, like, they're two people trying, or three people trying to do the work of like six or seven people. And eventually all that stuff catches up with them. Uh, so, and, yeah, I, I spent many years and all sorts of money trying to keep our business afloat, ultimately for, you know, just when we thought maybe we were starting to turn a corner and could start, you know, getting ourselves out of a hole, COVID came and just, you know, and lockdowns came and just obliterated it. And then I had to go and get a corporate job and all that. And so, yeah, like, no one hates local ordinations and understands the struggles of small businesses more than me. It is, uh, it's killer, and it's like, uh, I understand when, like, leftists get super upset about, like, the mega corporations and whatnot. It's like, they definitely have an unfair advantage in this crony capitalist system we have. And I get really, like, I don't know if you get upset about this, Free, but I get so bad when I see, like, the Ben Shapiros of the world who are just like, whatever, man, stop complaining and just work harder. And just like, they're kind of like taking libertarian talking points and applying it to the current market we live in as if we live in a free market. And it's just like, if there's not opportunities where you live, just move somewhere else. And I'm like, what do you mean move somewhere else? Like, where all the opportunities are, the rent and the cost of living is too high, and not people can't just afford to get up and move, and people can't afford to be entrepreneurs. The money is debased and things cost 10 times more than they did 10 years ago. It's like, so, like, I understand when people get, like, listen, I understand we're the party and the movement of personal responsibility, but that doesn't come at the expense of understanding when the government's screwing you over.
Yeah, and I think that if we want to win over people, right? Like, older people are the ones that tend to vote more. And so it's like, how do you think about talking to older people that are voting for, entitlement programs and all of that? Like, they're not going to touch the Republicans aren't going to touch the entitlement programs because that's their base that's voting for them, right? And so, like, I think you got to make a counter argument to say, well, yeah, like, you want these entitlement programs or whatever, but we can also save you a lot on your monthly bills by bringing down the regulations on insurance, energy, healthcare, all of these things, and then, cutting costs from local businesses so you could buy, better food from local sources, and get it for cheaper, as opposed to the opposite that happens now, where it's so expensive that only major corporations can produce food at any scale to stock a grocery store, right? And so like I think we need to like go after their wallet and say specifically, like, you're paying so much for insurance, so much for healthcare, so much for all of these things. Would you vote for us as a lottery ticket to hopefully put, thousands of dollars back in your pocket every year?
Yeah. Something related to the local economy too. When I want to get your take on this, I haven't talked about this a lot. I don't know if this is a deviation from the libertarian worldview. You can tell me what you think, because I understand we're pro free trade, right? And I'm not pro tariff, but I do think it would be better if more things were made here. I understand that you can't make everything at home, and you do need free trade. But I think there's kind of a danger, as much as like there's a danger in isolationism, there's a danger, and I think it's kind of the product of government interventions and regulations, kind of like what you're alluding to, where like all of the food you eat comes from halfway across the world, right? And we saw this happen during COVID when like then grocery stores were running out of food because like they weren't able to ship things, people weren't able to grow things. Eggs went up in price. Suddenly, a lot of people are going out to buy chickens and raise their own chickens. And back when all that happened, I just kind of thought like, if you ever had some kind of like major interruption to like supply chains or some kind of like, even if it wasn't government caused, you had some kind of like, environmental disaster somewhere. People are kind of vulnerable with like, and they're like, it's one thing to say free trade benefits all, but I don't know if I want to equate free trade with this like globalist economy, globalist not in the good way, but globalist in the bad way, that kind of makes people dependent upon that kind of globalist system. And instead of having more of that kind of like, not that you have to like go be a homesteader and make everything yourself, but like maybe we should trade more and get more of our stuff from like our local communities and neighboring communities more than we do now. Like, does that make sense? Like, I think there's something to that where we're kind of like over like, if all of your food's coming from Brazil, maybe that's not not exactly the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Mike Decentralize. Him and I did a dozen or so shows last fall called Township Liberation, based on the book that he wrote called Township Liberation. And there we go. And if you go to my Twitter profile and go under my articles, I have those shows listed in the first article where it says the Freedom Uncut shows. But we talked a ton about this, right? And so like food's a perfect example of like, you can see government overreach and government killing local businesses and small businesses like more easily than any other way, right? Like, and we talked a ton about this where the average food delivery gets shipped over, I think it's like over 1,400 miles now. So you're not getting your food locally. Like Florida's getting food from California. Like, I mean, it makes zero sense, right? And there's an interesting story, like Mike Johnson, I think this was before he was speaker, was fighting for the rice farms in Louisiana. And, basically saying that like the government's killing the rice farms in Louisiana. And it's a perfect example of, we ship rice like 10,000 miles to get here to buy foreign rice. Like, explain to me in any economic way that makes any sense, that something so cheap and pretty heavy is cheaper to send 10,000 miles than to buy from a centralized location in the United States. And it's the
Right.
perfect example of the government hurts those businesses in every way, shape, or form, from labor to regulation to compliance to environmental nonsense. And, they drive up the price so much that like you're better off shipping rice from 10,000 miles away and, burning all the gas to get here and it ends up cheaper. It's like you can see that how the government just absolutely kills our economy in a very simple product.
Yeah. No, I'll definitely have to check that out. And it's one of those things where like you have to be careful because like I think the Maha types and MAGA types, like they see the problem. Now I think sometimes they can go too far the other way and then they're just like, yeah, like they go total isolationist, protectionist, and they're like, well, the solution is we got to shut down all this global competition and put tariffs in. And I'm just like, well, no, you just need to undo the regulations that have distorted all of the natural free market processes. And like, yeah, there are probably some goods, whether we're talking about food, talking about cars, talking about computers, anything, where like there might be certain parts of the world where like because maybe they're closer to a natural resource or something that like you do have to ship that to you. But like when everything you need gets shipped from somewhere else, like unless you're living in like, I don't know, like Siberia, like there's something in balance there. So I think this is one of those kind of going full circle where like there's so many instances where left and right people are reacting to real problems, and we have to come in and like affirm that and then start educating them on like here are the real solutions here, like which comes by understanding how we got here in the first place. So uh Free, we're out of time. I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a lot of fun. um People who are watching see they can follow you on Twitter at Smarter Game Show. Is there anything else you want to plug in terms of like where people can find the show or support what you're doing?
Yeah, so uh, the show's usually on Tuesdays and Fridays, 8 p.m. Eastern. We're off tomorrow for the Thanksgiving weekend, so we took a longer weekend. But then I got the opportunity to do this, so I came back from vacation to do this. So I was so excited to do it. But Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, we've got Chase Oliver, Amanda Griffiths, and Sergio Ortega, and that's going to be a really fun show. So I'm really excited about doing that. And you can catch our archives. Most of them are under my highlights on X, or you can catch us on YouTube at Freedom Uncut or Rumble at Freedom Uncut. And if you search it, you have to go past some George Michael's videos because apparently that's a live concert he did. But if you go to the username Freedom Uncut, you'll find us there. But yeah, and the thing about the show, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but we get a lot of audience participation, and I think that's a really fun part of it, that we get to hear opinions from lots of cool people in the audience. And so we get the 3 takes from the contestants, but we also get takes from people in the audience, and then of course the audience controls the score, which makes it a lot of fun. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, and it's typical libertarian chaos. So we're very authentic to the movement.
Yeah, it's organized chaos. I don't know. It's more like it's chaotic organization. I don't know the right adjective for it, but it's a lot of fun. Whatever it is, it's just it's the right balance of like there's a little bit of structure and then a little bit of making it up as you go. It's spontaneous order, in game show form. So definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun, and yeah, you do a good job, which which is what I like about your show is that beyond just the showmanship and the entertainment value is that it's a very eclectic group of people. It's not just the same group of people every week, and so you get to see different wings of the liberty movement and different people who specialize in different things. I know that's kind of the goal with what you're doing, so I really appreciate what you're doing, and yeah, just keep it up. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Yeah, when is Jacob coming back on? I guess I'll be looking for that invite
Yeah, we
for
should.
my round 2.
I was thinking about that earlier. We should have timed this where you were on the show before this, and then we could promote your show. But maybe next time. But yeah, we got to have you back on soon. And if anybody wants to be on too, you can follow me and DM me. But if you actually want to reach somebody that'll probably respond in a more timely fashion, Terry's in our chat. If you go to my profile on X, I have her handle in my profile, but she's Bats T76 on Twitter. And, she's the brains behind our operation and does a great job of putting together the panels we have. And we've had over 100 people in the year that we've been doing this. So like I was saying earlier, the libertarian speed dating idea, where you get to find out, you know, which people do you like and who do you want to listen to and who do you want to follow? There she is.
Yep. No, yeah, and I appreciate all you in the chat being engaged, and yeah, it'll be. I'm sure I'll be back on soon, but also I need to. I'll have to get some of my fellow LCI co-associates to consider appearances as well. So because we have again a whole podcast network here at LCI, and I'm just one of the hosts. But you can go to christiansforliberty.net if you want to check out the rest of our shows. But yeah, I'll just conclude by again reminding you guys this is our end of the year fundraiser. This is to fund everything we're doing in 2026. We had a really great 2025. You guys have been really good to us, and so just appreciative of all that. Again, every dollar you donate in the month of December will be matched dollar for dollar, and there is no cap, or if there is a cap, it's an unknown cap. So make us figure out the cap
Yeah,
of
right.
what our matching donors have promised to do. Right? We would love that so that we can we're actually planning. I don't know where everyone is at, but we are planning some of our first in-person meetups. We're planning a meetup next year, probably more like end of summertime. But we're planning a meetup in like the Ohio, like Indian, yeah, like kind of like where Ohio and Kentucky, I guess, kind of get close to each other, because we have guys in both of those states, so they're trying to find like a midway point to do like an in-person meetup, and we'd like to do more of those. So as well as showing up to Libertarian Party conventions, state conventions, Freedom Fest, Pork Fest, all that. If you want to see us there and see the show grow, more books come out. I mean, we're if you believe in the gospel and in liberty, we're your guys. So again, libertarianchristians.com/donate. I am here here in the green room typically every Monday evening. I will also plug that I will be back here again Thursday evening for a special edition of the show, where there's going to be a debate between Dave Smith and, as previously mentioned, Mr. Liquid Zulu. That's sure to get a little heated and a little spicy, but I'm going to do the best job I can as a moderator to make it a productive debate and an edifying one. The Bible says iron sharpens iron. Sometimes in that process, sparks fly. There might be some name calling. There might be some, people might lose their temper. Might be some profanities. I'm praying that it'll be productive, and that I'm gonna try to make them friends by the end of the stream. That's my goal. It's my goal. It's we have a one of my favorite guys here in my state party, Ken Kraushack, has this it's the Libertarian Friendship Caucus. We're make everyone like we're such a minority. We got to spend way less time punching in, more time punching up and out. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Free, for being here, and I will talk to you guys later. Take care.
Peace, y'all.